What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in. I am your host, Dan Kornhauser. I'm here with my co-host, Mike Goodpaster, and I want to thank you guys for tuning in. This is the AFC North Reloaded. Off-season grades and review. We're going to go over everything that went on in the AFC North, team by team. 4 questions per team. We're going to break them all down. Mike, you ready?
I guess. Yes, I'm ready, Dan.
That's what I like. Let's do it. Let's jump right in. The Baltimore Ravens. Mike, best off-season addition for the Baltimore Ravens.
I'll tell you, my biggest problem with all these teams is there a division that did less in the offseason? I mean, really, I can't hear you, Dan.
I didn't answer. I didn't say anything. I'm kind of just.
I mean, but really, when you look through this, I mean, there's not a lot that stands out. My best addition for them would be Ronnie Stanley. And I mean, last offseason, the Ravens pulled off a couple of huge free agent signings, guys like Derrick Henry in. They still came up short again in the playoffs for whatever reason that is. And my issue here is you still haven't given your quarterback any more playmakers. DeAndre Hopkins is a guy with the Chiefs last year. He's got a little bit left, but he's not DeAndre Hopkins of the past. So when I look at it, bringing Ronnie Stanley back may be the best, the biggest addition to this team. But, I mean, you got a few other ones here because you got the safety. What was his name?
Malachi Starks.
Yeah, Malachi Starks. But really, there's nothing here that blows me away. And like I said, that's kind of how it is when I look at pretty much all these teams, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, the Pittsburgh Steelers are the one team in the division that really won. We're going to have an interesting conversation on, I think, because they did add a few pretty important pieces on, at least on the offensive side of the ball. And when we get there, I think we'll have a good conversation. But yeah, with Baltimore, at least, you're right. Outside of DeAndre Hopkins, Chiawuzie, the corner that they signed from Tennessee, is slated to start for them at corner.
Yeah, but Awuzie is a guy who was good for the Bengals in the Super Bowl year. But every year before that with Dallas, he was below average. And since he left Cincinnati, he's been below average.
Yeah, he wasn't great with Tennessee, that's for sure. And I mean, his contract, reflects as such. I think he got like a 1-year deal, veteran minimum, but he's slated to start on the outside. But for me, their top addition, I'm going to say, is Malachi Starks. I'm a huge fan of the kid as a prospect. He was one of my first-round grades going into the draft. I think it's a bit of a luxury pick because I don't think they really needed a safety, particularly in the first round. They kind of lucked out, it turns out, because Zadarius Washington got hurt during workouts, and he's going to be out for the season. He was slated to be one of their key pieces in the secondary. They did bring him back as a free agent, but he got hurt during workouts. So Malachi Starks is slated to start. He's going to play a lot early and often. He gives them an opportunity to move Kyle Hamilton around. Kyle Hamilton has turned into one of the better safeties in the NFL over the last couple of years. He makes a lot of plays for them, and they're both versatile. So he's a Swiss Army knife. Starks is in the secondary. He can play up close to the line. He can play center field. I think him and Hamilton will make for a very fun safety duo. But with that, you said this team hasn't really made any splash additions like last offseason, and I agree. But what about any key losses that you see?
You got Justin Tucker. He's maybe the greatest kicker in NFL history. But, of course, there were a few off-field issues, Dan. And when you look at that, I think that hurts them. I think it hurts them a lot. You have the departure of Brandon Stevens, Patrick McCarry, but hopefully that'll be boosted, with the offensive lineman they drafted last year. And with Ronnie Stanley coming back here, because when you look at what they lost with the Ravens, they do have guys from the draft last year that are guys that can step up. I mean, I think corner TJ Tampa is interesting. You got right tackle Roger Rosengartner. I think they're set for big roles in 2025. So the additions may be guys that were already on the roster that haven't really fully developed yet.
Travis Jones stepping up at nose tackle for him.
Yeah,
another young
exactly.
piece.
So
For me, I was going to say Tucker, but since you took that, I'm going to go with Stevens because as of now, Nate Wiggins is starting at one outside spot, which is fine. But the other outside spot's going to be the TJ Tampa, Jalen Armour Davis, or Chiawuzi, like I mentioned earlier. And if they want a veteran, they'll start a Woozy. Maybe Tampa takes over later in the year. Maybe Tampa beats him outright in training camp. But it's a young secondary, and I'm sure they would have loved to bring back Stevens, particularly because he played so much. He played over 92% of the defensive snaps for this team last year. So a big loss, I think, for their secondary. But moving on, non-first round rookie who will make the most impact. Mike, I'm going to take this one so you don't take my guy. I'm going to say, I think this is an obvious one, but Mike Green, the edge rusher from Marshall, who they took in the second round, 59th overall. He's probably a player who should have went in the first round. The only reason he dropped is because he had off the field questions. There were some sexual abuse questions that he had not gotten suspended for. There were no charges. He, of course, denied all wrongdoing. And if he got drafted in the second round, then there's probably a good chance that Baltimore got enough information that they feel comfortable with the player, because guys have dropped for a lot less than having sexual misconduct allegations against them in college. And it actually, I think there's two of them, if I remember correctly, which isn't a good look considering what happened with Justin Tucker. Probably not good to lose a alleged sexual deviant and bring another sexual deviant onto the team.
well, now you got one in his prime. The other one's getting washed up. He could probably only do it once a day. You got a young guy, probably 3-4 times.
The allegations aside, Mike Green is a great fit for this defense. He should see a lot of time early on, at the very least, as a rotational outside rusher. Kyle Van Noy's getting old on the outside, and I think this was one of the steals of the draft. What do you think, Mike?
I think it was a solid pick. I like Emory Jones, the offensive tackle from LSU, but to me, I don't know if it is the best pick, but when you lose a Hall of Fame kicker, the next guy better be really good, and that's Tyler Loop out of Arizona. He's a kid that, I mean, we really don't know till we see him in the NFL. You know, everything's a little bit different from college, but Tyler Loop has to have a big season, because we saw last year the Bengals go 9-8, where they had 2 field goals that if they are made, the Bengals make the playoffs, possibly win the division. Instead, they missed them. They're out. And this is an AFC North where 90% of the games these 4 teams play against each other are close games. So the kicking game, special teams, is huge here. And it's going to be hard not to see some kind of drop off, because I don't think Tyler Loop is going to be Justin Tucker, but he better be pretty damn good.
Well, he was the first kicker that they've ever drafted as a franchise, and he did hit 6 of 9 50-plus yard field goal attempts in 2024 for Arizona. So he does have a big leg, and as you said, in the AFC North, with the weather and the close games, he's going to need it. So let's wrap up the Baltimore Ravens. Final question, Mike. Did this team get better, worse, or stay the same?
I think it's going to depend a lot on the younger guys we talked about that they drafted last year. I still question the special teams with no Justin Tucker. I would say that this team is very comparable to last year. And the big miss here is not having a stud. They need more help for Lamar Jackson to throw the ball. And the other question is this: Derrick Henry is a big bruising running back. How long does that go? You know what I mean? Most of those guys don't go much farther than Woody's gone so far. I think this is a team that, is still probably going to win 10 or 11 games. The reason I'll throw it into 10 possibly is because they do have some rough away games and rough home games. They've got a fairly tough schedule. So when I look at that, I would say that this is probably more standing pat than what they had. But I also will give the caveat: the 3 guys we talked about for the draft, the young guys last year, if they come through, then you could possibly be better. Just a little bit, but you could possibly be better.
Okay, so you got them sitting the same, possibly better, depending on the youngins. I like that. I'm going to say that they got a little better. DeAndre Hopkins on the outside. Yes, he's a little seasoned. I don't think he's quite got it like he used to. He had a few, let's just call them disappointing drops for Kansas City towards the end of the season. So, like you said, they need more weapons. Zay Flowers is undersized slot guy. But I'll say they got better overall. I like the depth that they added in the draft. Peebles is a solid late round pick. Mike Green, I mentioned, Starks, a lot of young pieces out there, and I'm excited to see how they factor in, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. So let's move on, Mike. All that being said, let's go to your squad. Let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. And there's a few things to chat about before we dive right into our 4 questions. And I want to know, number one, are they going to re-sign Trey Hendrickson or not?
I think they. I think this.
Before the start of the
I
season.
think that they will because they have no choice. I think they have screwed this up massively because I think he should have been traded. I think it is absolutely asinine to pay a one-trick pony defensive end $30 million a year. You're already paying your number 2 wide receiver pretty much that amount of money. And my concern here is you end up being the Indianapolis Colts, who spent all their money on 3 offensive players. And even though they're all 3 Hall of Famers, they only had 1 Super Bowl to show for it. So I think Trey Hendrickson is a liability against the run. All right. He doesn't contain well. He rushes the passer. That's all he does. If I'm the Bengals, I actually just stand at, he's already got a contract for the next year coming up at $16 million, I think. I think I'd tell him to play or don't play. It's up to him because he can't afford at his age. And see, his age is the other big thing. Because you look at a guy, 32 years old, he's a brash defensive end. They usually don't last much longer than that. And the issue right now is not how much money they're offering him. The issue is he wants 3 or 4 years guaranteed, and the Bengals want to go more of the 1 or 2 range, which I can't blame them. You can't go longer than that or more than that. But I think this is a team that, and a lot of people tell me I'm crazy, but I wouldn't have re-signed T. Higgins. I mean, you cannot tie that money up when you still have an offensive line with holes all over it and one of the worst defenses in the NFL. All right. And defensively, they didn't add a whole hell of a lot. They lost more than they added, probably. You will get Logan Wilson back healthy. But when you look at all of this, the Bengals front office, as they are often tend to do, they've dropped the ball on all of this. I thought the draft was average. You've got the Shamar Stewart issue. I mean, there's a lot of things here that are troubling, but you still got Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, which means you're going to score a lot of points. But does that end up being 9-8 every year until you take the trenches as being the most important part of a football team?
Well, you mentioned the defense and Chase and Burrow, and that's great. But like you said, with the defense, it was one of the worst in the NFL. You can't allow 30 points a game as much as they did last season. And I mean, I don't know where to start with this team, but with Hendrickson, I don't know. I don't know if you trade a Hendrickson from a defense that's already bad.
Why not? They're already bad, so it's not like they were good with him.
Fair.
And the other thing to remember is this. You're in the AFC North. Cleveland wants to run the ball. Pittsburgh wants to run the ball. Baltimore wants to run the ball. If you're in the AFC West, I could maybe see it then. But I think to win the division, I mean, there's a lot of things they could have done. It's all water under the bridge now. It's just according who gives in first right now. I think he'll be signed. I think he'll play the first game of the season. And chances are he'll probably sign a week or 2 before that first game because that's how things usually roll with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Okay, so that's a Trey Hendrickson. Let's talk about Shamar Stewart because you mentioned him. There's a situation going on there. It's really weird, and let's just go over it real quick. It sounds like, well, he left camp. He left whatever was going on OTAs. He was there for a few days. He did some interviews. He left without a contract. And the main issue, it sounds like that they want to include a stipulation in his deal that they've never done before, that no other contract that they've given out to players previously has ever these terms have ever been in another contract. And if I remember correctly, if I heard correctly, it sounds like nobody has ever done something like this. Now, what I'm talking about is the main thing is putting a clause in the contract that if he fails a drug test or gets arrested or something along those lines, that it voids the rest of his guaranteed money for the remainder of his contract, whatever that is. It sounds like that's unprecedented. On one end, that sure, teams have put in previous contracts for other teams, other players, that if you get arrested or whatever the terms were, you lose your guaranteed money for that season, but you don't lose it for the remainder of the contract. And his agents don't want to accept it. He doesn't want to accept it. And it sounds like it would just be a bad deal, because if he does accept a contract like that, where he allows the team to void all the rest of his guaranteed money, should something becomes the first one, and he becomes the precedent for it, for other teams to do it and other rookies to do it, and for the Bengals to do it to the rest of their players.
There are other teams that have those in their rookie contracts.
Like that poison pill that you void the rest of your deal. Yeah.
And this is the thing.
I don't know if that's a thing, but I know other teams have had.
This is the thing. I can tell you
that's
this.
Not the unprecedented part.
I can tell you this.
What's going on, dude?
I think it is absolutely asinine not to put that in a player's contract. But since nobody else does, and I mean, you vetted this guy supposedly, right?
Supposedly.
You think he's the best player that you could have picked in that draft at that point. I don't agree with that. I do think Stewart fits with what Al Golden wants to do. And right now, you can't afford to not have him in. So he made a comment that the Bengals kicked him out of camp for, about the Bengals would rather win the argument than win games. Yeah. And that is completely freaking true. This is a team. This is a team that is owned by the Brown family. From 1968 to now, they're probably, if they're not the worst organization in professional football, they're in the top 5 every year. They're an absolute joke as a front office. The only thing that has saved their ass is drafting Joe Burrow. And that's it. All right. They paid the money for Burrow. They paid the money for Chase. They paid the money for Higgins. And that's to placate the fans. You want the fans to continue to show up. And with those 3 guys, every year you're at least in the mix on the edge of the playoffs. Mm-hmm. The problem is there's no forward thinking here. Just like, do you really need to pay T. Higgins, your number 2 receiver, that much money? I mean, to me, it's kind of asinine. And I know all Bengal fans. And I love T. Higgins. He's a great player. Maybe they'll win the Super Bowl because they did that. But I think this, like I said, maybe you'll win 1. Probably not going to win 2 or 3, because you're still going to have the offensive line issue. And right now, if the defense is like it was last year, you have to outscore everybody. Could that happen? Possibly. But it's highly unlikely.
Now, with all that being said, one final question with Stewart, and then we'll get to the 4 questions for the Bengals. Is he going to be there for training camp? Are they going to just stop the nonsense and get a normal contract done with this kid?
I would imagine
practice into the season.
It's going to have to get done, because if he does it, he goes back into the draft next year, and then he's probably a 5th round pick.
Damn.
I mean, he's got no choice here. And the Bengals, especially if they don't bring back Trey Hendrickson, the Bengals have to. So they're kind of to the point where you're the 2 ugliest people at the prom. You kind of got to be at the prom together, because nobody else is going to be with you.
That's quite the analogy. I love it. And it's perfect for the Bengals. So let's dive in. 4 questions. First one, best offseason move. Let's not even call it an addition. Let's just say.
You're just saying that because about the only thing we got here is re-signing Chase and Higgins.
Geno Stone.
But Geno Stone is gone, isn't he? I hope he's gone.
No, they brought him back.
They brought him back. Well, he's an ass. So, I would say re-signing those 2 guys and re-signing Gesicki, Joseph Asai, B.J. Hill. Those are guys they had to re-sign, or they'd have really been in trouble. The biggest move to me is probably just getting a contract with Jamar Chase done.
I am actually going to go with a rookie as the best move because I don't want to go with re-signing the guys because that's too easy. I'm going to go with Demetrius Knight Jr., the linebacker from South Carolina. They took in the second round, 49th overall. This is a huge addition, not only because he's a 25-year-old rookie who played really well in the SEC, tackle machine, athletic, and he's going to start for them right away, but he's going to start for them right away, I think, because Jermaine Pratt, one of their defensive leaders, was released, signed with the Las Vegas Raiders this offseason in a pretty stunning move. I know he had requested a trade, but when you like with Hendrickson, when your defense isn't good to begin with, you aren't in the position to lose the quality talent that you have.
Jermaine Pratt is not a big time quality linebacker.
I mean, he was for them, and he was a defensive leader for what it's worth on a poor defense, but
he was not the defensive leader. Like the defensive leader is Logan Wilson. He looked like the defensive leader last year because Logan Wilson got hurt fairly early in the season.
Well, sure.
But Jermaine Pratt has, I mean, he has done some great things. He got the interception to win us our first playoff game in 34 years. But Jermaine Pratt, to me, is not a huge loss. And Demetrius Knight will be better than him. And I think he'll be better than him within 2 years. Maybe this year.
Maybe this year. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah.
So, I'm a huge fan of Knight. So I think that was their best addition this offseason.
I love Knight, too. He was going to be probably the guy I picked on the best pick that wasn't in the first round. So.
Well, I'm sorry if I blocked you on that one. You could still say Knight when we get to that question.
No, I set it up that way, so I'd still be able to.
Second question, biggest loss of the offseason.
The biggest loss of the offseason?
I wrote down, and
I would say the biggest.
I wrote down Pratt, just because.
I would say the biggest loss of the season. Number one is Mike Hilton. He was getting up there in age. Mike Hilton, damn good third corner. And I think Akeem Davis-Gaither, I think that's a big loss just because you need linebackers, and he probably wouldn't have taken that much money to sign. I'd put it like this. If I had to pick the two, I'd rather have Gaither back than I would have Jermaine Pratt.
Yeah, I think Gaither didn't really get that big of a contract from the Cardinals.
No, so I don't know. Maybe it just doesn't fit Al Golden's system. So I would say you could also say maybe the biggest addition is Al Golden, one of the coaches.
Yep, Notre Dame defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
How do you think he fits with this defense better than Lou did?
I think he's a guy you may see more 3-4 out of. I think he's a guy that I think Lou Anarumo was an excellent in-game defensive coordinator. I think the only reason Lou Anarumo didn't work here was because the front office let his best players go over the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, if you look at it, you had Jesse Bates. Yep. He leaves. Just Von Bell. I mean, the Super Bowl season, there wasn't a better safety combo in the NFL than Bell and Bates. Bell immediately is ushered out after the Super Bowl season. He's back now, or he came back last year. But Jesse Bates was let go after they lost the AFC Championship game to Kansas City. So I think at the end, Lou Anarumo's biggest issue was he didn't have the players. And I think if you watch this defense at the end of last season, the last 5 or 6 weeks, the defense actually played pretty well because he game plans schemes and he calls it very well. I think Al Golden is a guy that, let's face it, you need players to be a good coach, especially in the NFL. If you've got below par players, you can only do so much. You know, you can't turn shit into shinola, as the old saying goes. You probably never heard that one because you're like 12. But so that's what I would say. And I think that you still have an offensive line that sucks, and it's still an issue. I think Aren Burks was a decent pickup. I don't see too many great additions, but I see a few pretty big losses. So go ahead, Dan.
All right. So yeah, I said Pratt as the biggest loss on my end. Now, non-first round rookie who will make the biggest impact this season. And you said
Demetrius Knight. I love Demetrius Knight also. I think he's aggressive as hell. He is fast. Of course, he's young. He's 25. And I like the fact that he's 25. And let's face it, from now on, if people say, I don't want that dude because he's 25, with the transfer portal and everything that goes on there's going to be a lot more guys that are 24, 25 years coming into the NFL. Joe Burrow was 24, 25 his first year. That worked out just fine for the Bengals. So I like Demetrius Knight. And then I'll give you a dark horse also.
Yes, please. Yes, please, give me. Dark horse.
My dark horse would be I can't remember his name because I'm doing this off the top of my head, but the running back. Yeah, Taj Brooks from Texas Tech, I believe it was, correct? Mm-hmm. I like Taj Brooks, and I think he fits well in that backfield.
3,100 yards the last 2 years, 27 touchdowns. Not bad.
He ran for at least 100 yards, I think it was, every game last year. And I saw him play the West Virginia game where I think he had 3 or 4 touchdowns and almost 200 yards rushing. And he's a good blocker, too, which he's going to have to be because if you don't have offensive linemen, your running backs have got to block.
Dude, he's 5'10", 230. So he could bring a bit of pound to Chase Brown's dazzle out there. Because Chase Brown really came on in the second half of the season. Really showed out for that team. My non-first-round rookie, I want to say Knight because how great we've already talked about him. But I'm going to give you a different one. I'm going to say Dylan Fairchild. He only gave up 1 sack in his college career at Georgia. I give a little bit of extra credit to offensive and defensive linemen who played well in the SEC. He was one of the better pass.
There's been a whole lot of them that have been bust too, though.
That's fair, but they still keep getting the benefit of the doubt because the SEC competition is the best in college football.
It wasn't last year.
And Fairchild was a good pass blocker at Georgia.
But it was not the best, conference last year.
Yeah, well, can't do it all every year. But anyway, at least Fairchild should compete for a guard.
No, he will start. Guard. If he doesn't start, then Zach Taylor's an idiot. But Zach Taylor is an idiot, so he may not start. Well, I'll tell you, Jalen Rivers. I think Fairchild and Rivers, at least one will start. I think by the end of the year, they're both starting.
I mean, Rivers might start just because offensive line injuries happen. Be your swing tackle.
Well, the Bengals will start Fairchild because they'll pay him a little bit of money because he's a third-round pick, so they'll play him. Also, I think Barrett Carter, average pick, but I don't think it's a terrible fourth-round pick. I actually think the draft was pretty decent, and I know you're going to ask me if I think they got better or worse.
Yep, that's a fine question.
I'm going to give you the same answer I gave with the Ravens. I think there's a lot of stuff here that's got to fall right for them to improve. But you've got Joe Burrow, just like Baltimore has got Lamar Jackson. So I really expect both these teams to make the playoffs. And I would expect the Bengals to win the division because I think their schedule is slightly easier than what the Ravens is. And, I mean, that's my take on it. I think they pretty much stood pat. They did re-sign some guys. And I think this also, if you get a Happy Stewart in and he's good, just kind of like I said about the Ravens rookies from last year, if you get a Happy Stewart and he's the real deal, which I'm not sure he is. I mean, I'm not as down on him as I was the Miles Murphy joke pick, which hopefully you didn't disagree with me on that one.
No, I wasn't that high on Murphy.
Yeah, Miles Murphy sucks, and he's not going to get any better. But they'll let him stick it out for another year just because he's got guaranteed money. It's kind of why I like their draft picks not having guaranteed money because then they'll actually cut them. But as long as they got guaranteed money, they ain't cutting nobody.
Nice. So, all right, I'm going to say Cincinnati. I'm going to say they're pretty much the same, if not slightly worse, depending on what goes on with this Hendrickson situation and with the Shamar Stewart situation. Because if Hendrickson is gone, they need Shamar Stewart to get in camp early and really start working because his lack of production at the college level was pretty startling and it stood out. And to be honest, I'm a little surprised he went as high as he did because NFL teams, aside from the obvious physical talent that Shamar Stewart has, teams look for production from their middle or high first round picks. That's why they're middle or high first round picks because they have, theoretically more tools than the guys who are going to go in the second or third round. They have less questions. So it was more like a home run swing kind of a thing. And we'll see how it works out for him. But he's really going to have to step up. I think if they can get something out of Stewart, if they can get Knight to step in and not miss a beat at linebacker, DJ Turner has a better year, takes that next step in his development. Maybe this team can make some actual noise. But like you said, there's going to be a lot of things that need to come together. And speaking of needing things to come together, let's go to the Cleveland Browns, where this is a team, in my opinion, in shambles, and they're slated to be one of the worst teams in the league this year. And it's not because they suck. They do have some good talent. I like a lot of the pieces on the defensive side of the ball. I like their offensive line for the most part. I like what they've done at running back this offseason, but God, their quarterback situation is one of the worst in the NFL, if not the worst. But Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, Sanders, it's just a collection of guys who just don't really excite. And Mike, I got to ask, what was their best offseason move or addition? Because I was looking at it, and for me, there's not many. Oh, wait, Mike's gone. Mike, where'd you go? Oh, there he is. Okay, here we go.
You still talking?
Well, no, I asked you the question, and then I looked at the screen, and you were there for a minute, and then you were gone. See, technical difficulties. That's why you can't have nice things. But
you still talking?
Well, good. Now that you're back, and now that
you just keep going, all right.
You got the headphones in, and now that you're back, now you can answer the question. Give me the best offseason addition or move for the Cleveland Browns.
Did you give yours?
No.
Oh, well, go ahead and give yours because I got to get this camera set right now.
I was just rambling. So, all right. So, for me, the best, I don't want to say offseason move. I'm going to give it a straight up addition. I'm a huge fan of Mason Graham. I love that they traded down and got an extra first-round pick next year from the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't know what the Jaguars were doing that trade. They paid a quarterback price for a wide receiver who wasn't a full-time wide receiver in college / cornerback who wasn't a full-time cornerback, but he did play over 1,000 total snaps. We'll see how that works in the NFL. It sounds like he will play both sides for the Jaguars, but we're not talking about the Jaguars. We're talking about the Browns. And I love that they got Mason Graham.
Same damn thing.
He was one of my favorite picks in this draft. He was one of my favorite players. I don't care that he has short arms. I don't care that he was below 300 pounds at the weigh-in. I don't care. The tape is special. He's strong. He's stout. He goes whistle to whistle, and the tape is great. He's good against the pass. He's elite against the run. He's going to be an absolute menace on the interior of that defensive line. Him on the inside, Myles Garrett on the outside. I love everything about that.
And the problem is there's really not anything else unless you go one of their Judkins or Sampson at running back. Mason Graham's it. I'm not going to pick, Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett. And I think this, Dan, I think the key loss to me has to be Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I'm just kidding. Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb has to be the biggest loss here, but he's getting up there in age, and they replaced it in the draft. So I think they'll be fine there.
Yeah, for me, the biggest loss, I'm going to go with Jed Willis, their left tackle. And I only say that because, sure, he only played 20% of the snaps last year, I believe, due to injury. But Dawad Jones is currently slated to start at left tackle. And Cornelius Lucas, who they signed as a free agent, is his most likely backup and the swing tackle for this team. But I don't know how I feel about Dawad Jones at left tackle. He's more of a right tackle in my opinion. He was a right tackle in Ohio State. I know they have Jack Conklin at right tackle, and he's a solid player there when he's healthy. But I would have probably brought back Willis. There's not a lot of quality offensive tackles in the NFL. Willis isn't good.
Isn't good means he's top half of the league.
Yeah, Willis ain't good. What you talking about, Willis? But again, I don't know if Dawad Jones is it at left tackle. So we got the biggest offseason addition, biggest loss. Now we got the non-first round rookie who's going to make the biggest impact in his rookie season.
You want me to go? Quinshon Judkins, the running back. I think Dylan Sampson was a good pick too from Tennessee, but I like Judkins.
I love Judkins, but I'm going to go with Harold Fannin Jr.
Now, that's the
Harold
big tall
Fannin
one, right?
is
6'7" or something.
No, he's actually slight. I think he's like 6'3" or something like that. And he didn't run particularly well at the combine, but I don't care about his 40 time at the combine because on tape, he's running away from linebackers and safeties. He's got soft hands. He gets open. And the Browns don't really have a lot at receiver. They did nothing in the offseason to address the position. It's Jerry Jeudy, who had a great year for them, but Cedric Tillman, who was a third-round pick a couple of years ago, who hasn't really done anything special to this point. Jamari Thrash, who they took in the 5th round last year. They signed Deontay Johnson in the offseason, who's bounced around to a couple of teams because he's a bit of a head case. I'm not impressed by these offensive weapons, but they're going to pass the ball eventually. But with the lack of talent at receiver, I see them running a lot of 2 tight end sets because David Njoku is one of the better receiving tight ends in the NFL. And I think he's going to be a great weapon for him. He's probably their number 2 target in the passing game after Jerry Jeudy. But that means Harold Fannin Jr. is going to see a lot of time in those 2 tight end sets. And like you said, when we were talking about the Bengals earlier, you said the Browns are going to want to run the football. They got Jerome Ford. As you mentioned, they drafted Judkins in the 2nd round. They drafted Dylan Sampson in the 4th round out of Tennessee. So they are committed to the ground game. And their quarterbacks are questionable.
They don't have any. They have a guy who is a has-been. They have a guy who was a never was. And they got 2 guys that were never will be. And they'd have been much better off to draft football players instead of Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah. The way, in hindsight, the way that went down, it was a waste of a 3rd-round pick to take Gabriel.
And a waste of
because they got
both of them. I mean, neither guy should be drafted. Gabriel, I think, is better than Sanders, but
with the Sanders thing was
it's
crazy.
Almost like the NFL
about that for a hot second.
Because why would you want to pick 2 rookie quarterbacks in the 3rd and 5th round?
Yes, that's maybe not. They didn't. Maybe the NFL didn't say you have to pick them, but I think it got to the point where the Browns were looking at the board and were like, "Damn, dude, we should have taken this kid in the 3rd round instead of Gabriel. Maybe we should just take this kid now because Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco are nobody."
Well, actually, Joe Flacco has a Super Bowl.
Sanders might be started by the end of the year. But I do want to talk about Sanders real quick before we move on, only because it was such a huge thing in the draft. There were a lot of experts who said he would be a 1st-round pick. I mocked him in the 1st round. Almost everybody did. The sheer thought of Sanders dropping not only out of the 1st round, which was possible. Some people did suggest it, but all the way to the 5th.
Why is it crazy? He doesn't have NFL capabilities. He's not a good enough athlete. I mean,
that's the thing about him. He doesn't have any elite qualities, and that's part of the reason why he dropped. He doesn't have the elite athleticism. He doesn't have the big arm. He doesn't have the pinpoint
can't read a defense. And he holds on to the ball too long, and he's never been coached by an actual football coach. That hurts.
Takes too many sacks. He's been coached by daddy his whole life, so we don't really know how he's going to respond to actual coaching from someone who's not his father. So, yeah, that's all those reasons are why he dropped. But I'm curious to see how this quarterback competition goes this offseason because there's 4 quarterbacks. NFL teams don't keep 4 quarterbacks. I think the last one to actually do that of any relevance going into the regular season, I could be wrong. Don't kill me for it. But the last one I feel like was the Patriots back when they kept Tom Brady because they kept 4 quarterbacks that season
but also
as well at the start of the season.
Different back then, so
they had guys like Brock Heward and Ben Bishop and Tom Brady and whatever, and of course Drew Bledsoe at that time. But teams don't really go into the season with 4 quarterbacks, so I don't think they're cutting one of the rookies. So I'm curious to see, is it going to be Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett who's out? So that'll be remains to be seen, and we'll discuss this more in depth once training camp rolls around and we do our predictions for the season and whatnot. But Let's move on. Oh, wait, did they get better
the
or
Cleveland
worse?
Browns, they never get
Browns.
better.
Oh, yeah. So we're both going to say they got worse. Let's move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers and put a pretty bow on the AFC North. Best offseason addition for the
Metcalf.
Pittsburgh Steelers.
I don't want you to steal mine. You
DK
keep going
Metcalf.
first, so I can't steal yours. Of course, the Cleveland one I was disheveled.
So, Mike, go. You said DK Metcalf.
Well,
why
I
DK
mean,
Metcalf?
I would say you had addition by subtraction when you get rid of Pickens. Great player, head case. DK Metcalf, great player. My only question is this: does he ever play a complete season? Not a whole lot, I don't think. So you got injury issues there. I don't know. When I look at this, DK Metcalf's the best one I come up with. Everybody's going to scream Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers was 41 years old last year, and I'm pretty sure the New York Jets went 5-12 with him at quarterback. He has talked about retiring every year for the last few years. The old adage in boxing is once a fighter starts to think about retirement, he's retired.
Ashley, I'm not a boxing guy, but I've actually heard of that. I think that's been used with NFL players in recent seasons.
So, I mean, this to me is Russell Wilson had a good season last year. It wasn't Russell Wilson's fault. They just didn't have enough around him. And when you look at this, they lost 2 or 3 offensive linemen, Larry Ogunjobi, Najee Harris. I think Derek Harmon was a very good pick. I think it's the pick the Bengals should have taken, but they didn't. I think Jack Sawyer, he's a bust. The guy that's interesting to me, and he may be the quarterback of the future, is Will Howard. And I don't really mean the quarterback of the future like he's a franchise quarterback, but I think Will Howard would have been one of my top 2 quarterbacks in this draft. And there was nobody in this draft I thought should be a first rounder, so I'm not really talking Will Howard up that much.
No, dude, I loved that Will Howard pick. I was talking to a Steelers fan actually yesterday, and we were talking about their draft and the offseason and whatnot, and he was a little iffy on Will Howard, not quite sure how he would, translate to the NFL. I said, dude, you shouldn't have any worries at all. He's got good size. He's got good enough physical traits. He's got plenty of starting experience. The man knows how to win chips because they just won a national championship. High completion percentage in 2024. A good deep ball passer. Just enough mobility to be useful. And he's tough. Playing at K-State and Ohio State, I think he was a huge steal. One of my absolute
David Burnworth says Baltimore
will
win the division, but that's just because he's a Bengals hater. And David Burnworth loses, all eligibility for knowing anything because, David, you're a Dallas Cowboys fan. Go ahead.
Boo, Cowgirls.
I'm just teasing him. Not about the Cowboys thing.
Bro.
That's just sad. But
Cowboys suck. So, best offseason addition, I'm going to go with Darius Big Play.
That would have been my second
choice. Cornerback they brought in this offseason from Philly. Just got a chip. He's still playing at a high level. He should start immediately opposite of Joey Porter Jr. He gives Porter Jr. his best running mate that he's had in the NFL thus far. And he boosts the secondary on a defense that needed some help. Their pass defense wasn't quite right. Cam Hayward is an elite defensive lineman, one of the best human beings in the NFL, someone who does a lot for his community. TJ Watt, of course, is TJ Watt. He's up for a new contract soon, probably going to get Myles Garrett money. Well, probably surpass that because that's how these things go. But despite having such pieces, their defense, their passing defense was pretty butt, particularly at the end of the season where I believe they lost 5 straight games and their defense fell apart. So a guy like Darius Slay adds a veteran presence at secondary. It helps them make sure a guy like Corey Trice Jr. is not starting, which would have been a disaster on the outside. And there's a few guys that they added, Harmon, Jack Sawyer, Metcalf, of course, Rodgers that I would have mentioned, but I'm a huge fan of Slay, former Detroit Lion. Now, the biggest loss, Mike, you said it's addition by subtraction. I agree with that sentiment. However, based on the state of the rest of the depth chart, I'm going to say the biggest loss this offseason was George Pickens. Yes, he's a head case.
Then how's he a
Yes,
loss?
it was time that he moved on. Because their receiving room is atrocious.
That's kind of like saying that,
Robert,
I'm not going to cut this cancer out because I'm fat.
The fact that Robert Woods is their likely number 2 wide receiver is a travesty. Calvin Austin is being depended on for a bigger role. He's an undersized slot guy who's better on special teams. I liked Roman Wilson coming out of Michigan, who was their 3rd-round pick last year, but he did literally nothing as a rookie. I barely saw the field.
And you got a cancer, you get rid of him. That's addition by suspension.
I know, and that's why I say it with an asterisk, because I'm just going by pure talent and the depth chart.
If everything was settled by pure talent, there'd be a lot of dudes that are absolute studs in the NFL right now.
Well, let's be honest though. Who did they lose of note? James Daniels was hurt most of the year. Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, who cares? Dan Moore sucked at left tackle. Najee Harris was underwhelming at best and only played half the snaps because they seemed to prefer his running mate. Jalen Warren.
He's an all right player. And I think this. I think Ogunjobi, Williams, Harris are losses. They're not huge losses. They're losses that are easily overcome. So they didn't lose anybody that it's going to be hard to overcome losing them. Put them like that.
Yeah, so it was kind of tough. So that's why I'm going with him. Just a lack of talent at receiver. And let's be honest, you got to give Aaron Rodgers as much talent as you can give him because he's an old man.
And also, I'll bring this up. You might as well keep George Pickens because Aaron Rodgers is a cancer too.
Well, that's the thing. If you're going to bring on a head case like Aaron, you might as well just keep the other guy who's talented. Maybe him and Rodgers become best friends. Who knows?
They get arrested together.
There you go. Non-first round rookie who's going to have the biggest impact this season.
I mean, Najee Harris is gone. I like Caleb Johnson. He's a good running back. He did it in the best conference in football this last year, not over time. But I think that Caleb Johnson, by far, is the guy that will have the most impact. I think Will Howard was a good pick in the 6th round. I think that he will turn out to be better than Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel. Now, by better means he'll probably be a 10-year backup, but that's my take. Caleb Johnson, I think, was a home run, though.
Yeah, I love the Caleb Johnson edition. I do like the Jack Sawyer edition. 63
The guy will be a complete and utter bust.
I don't know if that's because your IU hate because he's Ohio State.
No, not really.
But
wait a second. I just got done talking about how good I thought Will Howard could be, and you're going to say that I hate Jack Sawyer because he plays for Ohio State.
It's different. Will Howard was a transfer. Jack Sawyer was, a big recruit with a name, Sawyer, and so Ohio State. Shut up, whatever. I'm going to say Jack Sawyer just to be different.
No, it's because you believe, or you believed that was the answer to the question until I argued with you, and 90% of the time
I am a fan of Sawyer. He's going to be the first edge rusher off the bench behind Watt and Highsmith, and I think he fits
I think he fits too, because he'll be the 3rd guy, so he didn't have to take up many snaps and show everybody how bad he can.
Did the Steelers get better, worse, or stay the same?
I don't know. When I look at this quarterback, I think it's kind of a push. I mean, really, I don't know that Aaron Rodgers could be as good as Russell Wilson was consistently last year, and he wasn't that good. I mean, he didn't put the ball in the end zone, which is what you've got to do. You still got the same coach. I think this. I think I will say they improved slightly because I think that they did improve their physicality because they really had issues stopping the run. You got guys like Malik Harrison, Thornhill. I think they got more physical. I would say they're slightly better, but I also will say this. If Aaron Rodgers falls apart, this could be Mike Tomlin's first losing season because I still don't think the offensive line is going to be that good. And I still think they have issues with physicality on defense at the second and third levels.
I'm going to say that they got better.
And we agreed. I said I thought they got a little better.
Yeah, I'm going to say I agree. I think they got better. Aaron Rodgers, Caleb Johnson, DK Metcalf. That's a nice trio that they brought in this offseason. Like we already talked about, Will Howard, I'm a huge fan of. Derek Harmon, like you mentioned earlier.
Greg Gorecki said they got worse, so you're wrong. And then, of course, we got Robert Carter. He's a Steelers fan.
Greg sucks.
And then we got Vi, who said something. I don't know what the hell that means. It's probably, where's the meatloaf? And Greg, I disagree because of this. You say the Steelers may finish at the bottom of the division. It's possible. But Aaron Rodgers, is still better than the guys the Cleveland Browns got rolling. And the Cleveland Browns, I don't think, have near enough offensive weapons around their four atrocious quarterbacks for it to really matter. David, I missed this question. How many Super Bowls does your team have? Mine has more. The problem with that, Dave, is this. If I'm 33 years old, or if I'm 30 years old, I've never seen the Dallas Cowboys win a Super Bowl. So the old joke is Cowboy fans like to sit around and watch the History Channel to talk about how good their team was. And Greg agreed with me on the Steelers and the Browns. And also, I think the Browns will fire their coach by the time the year's over.
So you did say the Dolphins.
Yeah, the Dolphins will be first, but the Browns will fire their coach also. And Dan, you froze up. And if you don't come back in a second, I'm just going to end the show because we're at 51 minutes. You promised me it only.
Dolphins would be the first team to fire their coach.
Yeah, you're back. And now you're froze again.
I'm back.
Now you're back again.
Okay, so
now you just look like a moron. But go ahead.
I'm good. Okay, so let's wrap it up. Let's put a bow on it. Do you have any final thoughts for the any AFC North offseason stuff?
Well, Dave liked my History Channel thing, and also, David, if you want, you can throw where you can find your articles for your high school football. He's one of the best high school football writers around. So if you throw that up right now, I'll let everybody know where they can find you. But my thoughts are this division as always should be good. But I think you really only have two Super Bowl contenders in the Ravens and the Bengals. And a lot of that depends with the Bengals on the defense, of course, and with the Ravens, if you've got enough weapons to throw the ball when you get to playoff time. Because you got to be able to throw it a little bit. Lamar Jackson has shown that he's come up short almost every time. He hasn't been to a Super Bowl. Joe Burrow has. And I think the Bengals will win the division because of Joe Burrow. But if they don't, they'll lose the division because their front office is a bunch of dumbasses.
Bengals, poor allocation of resources re-signing T. Higgins. But that's all I'll say. We're done with the AFC North. Mike, thank you. David, Greg, Robert, thank you guys for tuning in and contributing. Michael, appreciate you guys. We're going to be
Don't forget Vi or V.
Vic.
Vic? Okay. All right, real quick. If you want to check out David Burnworth, you could check out, it would be davidburnworth.blogspot.com. Make sure you check it out, especially if you love high school football. davidburnworth.blogspot.com. Greg Gorecki says, just as bad for me as the Browns haven't won the NFL championship since I was 5 years old, and I will be 66 in August. Well, I can tell you this. Out of all my teams, my favorite teams are IU in football and basketball, the Bengals, the Reds, and the Indiana Pacers. I have not seen my team win it all since 1990. And the thing that ruined it for me was before the age of 23, I'd seen the Bengals in 2 Super Bowls, the Reds in 3 or 4 World Series, IU in 3 national championship games. Since then, nothing. Just the one Bengals Super Bowl loss and one what looks like Pacer loss in the NBA Finals coming up.
Well, sucks to suck. Pick better teams.
You're a Lions fan, dumbass.
Sucks to suck. Pick better teams. And
you like the Lions and the Knicks, if I remember correctly.
Be sure to
Correct?
stay tuned. Yep. Be sure to stay tuned to the Grueling Truth and catch us on our next show. We'll be doing the AFC South some point, maybe later this week. We'll find out. But for Mike Goodpaster, I'm Dan Kornhauser. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for checking out the Grueling Truth. We'll catch you guys next time.